you done now?
Well, someone's got to break the ice, and it might as well be me. I mean, I'm used to being a hostess. It's part of my husband's work, and it's always difficult when a group of new friends meet together for the first time to get acquainted. So I'm perfectly prepared to start the ball rolling. I mean, I have absolutely no idea what we're doing here, or what I'm doing here, or what this place is about, but I am determined to enjoy myself, and I'm very intrigued, and oh my, this soup's delicious, isn't it?
You say you are used to being a hostess as part of your husband's work?
Yes, it's an integral part of your life when you are the wife of a... Oh, but then I forgot we're not supposed to say who we really are, though, heavens to Betsy, I don't know why.
Don't you?
I know who you are.
Aren't you going to tell us?
How do you know who I am?
I work in Washington, too.
Washington, so you're a politician's wife.
Yes, I am.
Well, come on then. Who's your husband?
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Clue, the movie podcast, where we break down the 1985 cult classic Clue, 1 minute at a time. Joined, as always, by Sergeant Jeff Smith. My name is the Beau Brad Gilmore, and we're talking about minute 13 of Clue, the movie. It starts with the rant from Mrs. Peacock, and it ends with Colonel Mustard with an inquiry for Mrs. Peacock. That does
Very good minute. Very good minute. Couldn't have planned it better. Well done, Brent.
Lot here. There's a lot here. Okay. First off, the rant from Mrs. Peacock. Do you have any background on this from Eileen Brennan? Because it's a very memorable moment from the movie where she goes on this awkward rant.
It's one of the most quotable parts of her, and it's definitely the mile a minute part when the actors all got together when they first started, when they were about to start shooting Clue. John Valin had them all watch the movie His Girl Friday to watch a movie that has very fast dialogue and just mile a minute dialogue. And Eileen Brennan, I guess the quote after they were done watching it, she said, "Well, you could tell that was before the method. They just talked." So she definitely was more of a method actress. And then this movie, the dialogue is more stylized, more theatrical. And obviously she got over that feeling because she is just as big and theatrical as anybody else, probably even more. We'll see later, as I love to say on this podcast. I always like to jump to the next minutes. She gets very theatrical. But she has just the rant of the century, and it's something that people, if they can quote it, you know that they know Clue, because it's a lot of dialogue and it's very fast. And then after that, we get Mr. Green really kind of revealing himself for the first time as being not just Mr. Accident Prone when he says, "I know who you are." And then I have noticed this, but it's interesting that her glasses come off.
Mm-hmm.
Because so in the way you were describing how Mr. Green is playing the character, what was the wrestling term you used?
He's working us.
He's working. I think she is too, because she's like being, I'm here and have a good time, glasses, and they're funny. And then the second he says, "I know you are," glasses come off. "How do you know who I am?"
Right.
And then Professor Plum says, "So you're a politician's wife?" She says, "Yes, I am." And then the glasses come right back on.
Very interesting body language. Okay, let's talk about Peacock. Okay. So she gives the hint of, in my husband's line of work, we have to do a lot of dinner parties, essentially, right?
Right.
First off, the accent of Eileen Brennan is interesting. I don't know if it's a throwback to, because how people would talk in like the 20s and 30s.
Yeah.
Especially that it's not an English accent, but it has traces. There's an ancestry there to more of a
faux European, the way.
But I'm determined to have a good time. I don't know.
Right.
She does that.
It could be Romans from the 30s movies, or they could be from Alabama. Who knows? She definitely has that. So again, plays into that kind of His Girl Friday, Cary Grant kind of. I mean, what was his accent? It was English, kind of.
Yeah. English,
but not like. Yeah, definitely. So she definitely has that, but then also it goes away when the glasses come off. Then it's just the character comes.
So let's think about this of Mr. Green, let's think about this through what we know of his character. Again, if you accept the third ending as the true ending, which it is, this is how it really
Yeah,
happened.
this is what really happened. Yeah, exactly.
We know that Mr. Green, spoiler alert, is a member of the United States government. He works for the FBI. He's an agent.
Right.
Why then would he reveal himself to work in Washington at this dinner party? If his whole thing is, like I said before, he's working us and he's undercover and he's trying to portray something that he isn't, why would he say, I know who you are?
Well, he's got one night. He's got to figure this stuff out. You know,
He's got
kind of presented herself. So like he's laying track. He's getting it started. He's okay. I know who you are. And then watch how quickly she crumbled immediately just with I know who you are. Because then the next minute, like when they say, who's your husband? And they get interrupted, he just gives her a look like, I know.
Yeah. But so okay. So Mr. Green then is willing to offer up the information that he works in Washington, D.C. So right now we know that he works in Washington. She lives in Washington because her husband's a politician. We've figured this out. We don't know what Mr. Green does at the moment. But when he says, I know who you are, it's very sinister.
Very out of character. Like that's why it's jarring that he does that, which is kind of fun when you're watching the movie because you're like, whoa, where'd he come from? Because right now he's just kind of a goofball that spills his drink. That's all we've seen him do. Spill his drink and sit down when Wadsworth was talking to dogs. So all of a sudden, and he has had in a moment since then. He's had 2 moments in this entire movie, 3 if you count him not checking out of vet, and now he doesn't even look at her when he says it. He's looking down at his shark fin soup, like he's just curious to see what her reaction is going to be. And then it's big.
Yeah. It's she does a very big reaction. She
crumbled very fast.
So why do we think she crumbled so fast? Did she think that she was living in this world of anonymity under this Miss Peacock pseudonym and nobody knew who she was? Because again, this is pre-internet, obviously. Like people can't pick you up.
She's a terrible liar. Because it happens later in the movie too. Whatever I just don't think she's used to being questioned on it. And when she does, she's surprised that anybody knows what she's up to.
Now, let me ask this.
Yes.
Professor Plum makes the assumption that her husband's a politician because she works in Washington, or they live in Washington. She says, my husband's line of work. So he says, is your husband a politician? She says, yes, he is, or whatever, and puts the glasses back on.
Yeah.
And then Colonel Mustard says, come on, tell us who's your husband. Now, again, we live in an age today where I think a lot of people in their mid-20s on up are very more aware of political figures now, perhaps, because they such dominate the news cycle. But I think in generations prior, say I lived in freaking Des Moines, Iowa, or Truth or Consequences, New Mexico, or Cut and Shoot, Texas, which is a real place. Let's say I lived in any of these crazy towns. I might not be well up to date on all the representatives and senators living in Washington, D.C. When Colonel Mustard says, well, come on, tell us who's your husband, he's one, letting us know that he's aware of the political landscape, and 2, is that a clue to him also being in Washington?
Well, it could be 2 things. Yeah, one, that he is in Washington, so it'd be on his radar. But also, this movie is taking place during McCarthyism. So right now, the politicians are being brought forward, and there may be some names that they know more than others. So, I mean, she could say, "Oh, it's Senator Peacock," and they go, "Oh, I don't know who that is," and move it on.
But you are right, because of this McCarthyism backdrop, because you got to think, when there are these big congressional hearings or investigations by the United States government, television time is devoted a lot to him. McCarthyism early on. You go to the Watergate trials, even more recently with impeachment hearings and things like that, and Senate confirmation hearings. People are glued in, and you see a lot more television time from senators and representatives than you would in any other moment.
People you never heard of. I mean, even going to the OJ trial, I'm not happy that for the rest of my life I will know who Judge Ito is, but I do.
And Kato Kalin
and Kato Kalin and
Robert Kardashian and
all of them, right? I mean, we know them forever. So if that was what was on TV at the time, politicians were a big deal.
Yeah. Oh man, the OJ trial. Hadn't thought about that in a minute. But so you're saying that it's very possible that either he lives in Washington. He is a colonel too. We don't know that he's we don't know that he's a shoot colonel yet. To use a wrestling term, we don't know that he's a real colonel, but he carries the prefix of colonel. So maybe being in the military, obviously, you're aware of political leadership and landscape as well.
Yeah, it could just be they're all Washington people. So what they're all doing in New England, I don't know, because it's not that close.
No,
but there they are.
There they are.
No wonder a colonel town. That's hours.
Yeah,
a long drive. They all drove from Washington to somewhere in New England.
Well, let's talk about that too. Like, what would be the motivation there? Far enough away from where they live, so is it just have them in a secluded location where it would be harder to find them? If the plot is to kill them all.
Yeah, I don't know. I need to call Jonathan Lind again.
We have so many questions.
I know. Like, hey. Thanks for all your time on the documentary, but we started doing this minute by minute breakdown, and your answer is just not good enough anymore. I need to know.
I'm sure he would have no clue, or would he?
He probably, I don't know.
The minutia of it.
Very well, and some things. I mean, he forgot the details of the fourth ending of Clue. So
right,
who knows?
Interesting.
Some things were important and some things were not. He might be like incredibly entertained that we're spending this much time thinking about the drive from Washington to New England. Like, who cares? Okay, good point.
So I'm looking at Mrs. Peacock, and we should know that she comes from some sort of money, right? With the fox fur that you pointed out, even the cat's eye frames of her eyeglasses have bedazzled jewels on them. She has rings, even one on her pinky. She's kind of a more of the ritzier dressed of all of them. Could that also be a clue of, politicians are well known. They're not necessarily well paid at the time. Where's all this money coming from?
Well, I also think what's interesting about Eileen Brennan as Mrs. Peacock, apparently in the original script of Clue, the character of Mrs. Peacock was much more straight-laced and kind of uptight and proper. And then her crime was like more shocking. And the scatterbrain version of Mrs. Peacock we got was definitely a creation of the actress. And then Michael Kaplan, the costume designer, knew, I guess, her Eileen Brennan's style of acting and kind of designed the costume around her, kind of jittery nature, which is why she has the feather. Well, peacock, of course, but also the feathers are on the hat. So while she's moving, even when she stops, she keeps moving. So Eileen Brennan definitely brought her interpretation of the character, but I can also see Mrs. Peacock being a very straight-laced kind of like old school teacher kind of, like when later in the movie, she'll go off on a whole rant about, I've never done anything wrong.
Right. She's meant to be the holier than thou. Whereas we look at the three female characters in the movie, Miss Scarlet, we can already tell is a little bit not the proper isn't the word to describe her.
And she's fine with it.
And she's fine with it. Mrs. White, we haven't gotten a whole lot from right now, but just her. There's a very sharpness to the way that she delivers her lines. They're very.
At this point in the movie, she makes me nervous.
Yeah, she's uncomfortable. You're uncomfortable around her. Whereas Mrs. Peacock is, I'm determined to have a good time,
I'm used to the part of my husband's work.
She seems like somebody who would be the proverbial goody two shoes.
Hostess around the party, like making sure everybody was having a great time.
Yes, yeah. She'd be refilling drinks and bring more cocktails and whatever. Being a hostess. So we're learning a lot about these characters, and we're about to learn a little bit more. Is there anything else from this minute in particular that stands out? Was there any about the dinner really scene altogether? Was there anything that you learned during your research, as they put it, that stuck out to you about this?
It's the dinner scene is basically just, I mean, it's very traditional in these kind of movies to have everybody sit around a table. It's the only time it really happens. It will be a clue as to for Mrs. Peacock's motives in 2 out of 3 endings that she gives away things. But right now we're just kind of still establishing the geography. Although once we leave the dining room, which we're about to, we really don't go back.
Right.
This is it.
There is.
They go back when they're like recreating, the evening, but there's not a scene in there except when Mr. Green takes the cop around and says, "So this is the dining room."
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's no other. Yeah, you're right. There's no other real big moment.
We're just there to kind of look at everybody.
Right. So they have this sit down dinner scene in the movie, and yeah, well, we have more to go to. So I guess this is more of a. It's more of what would you call it in screenwriting terms? It's just like exposition.
Exposition, yeah, definitely for sure. We're definitely.
Yeah, this is the exposition. Just kind of laying information that the audience needs to know in order to follow the plot.
As they say.
What do they call it?
Laying pipe.
Laying pipe. Yes, of course. Well, I think that's all for minute 13.
13.
And I think we're going to have to come back now in minute 14, unless you want to skip over that minute and instantly end up here in the future. See, I did a Back to the Future. Einstein skipped over the minute.
No, we will not skip.
We're going to 14. We're going to 14, guys. We're going to minute 14. That's Jeff Smith, cluedoc.com, theboatbradgilmore.com, and we'll be back with minute 14, Clue the Movie Podcast. Don't go anywhere.
Oh, Brad, what have you done now?